Just this past week, Elon Musk announced the formation of a new company called Neuralink, designed to put artificial intelligence into our brains. My talk is somewhat similar to that in that I'm going to talk about using technology to improve human cognitive function. But I'm not talking about inputting anything into a child's brain except for knowledge, skills, and capacity. So this talk is a little less invasive than what Elon is considering, and perhaps a little less cyberborg-like. I would like to nominate the invention of the written word, of reading and writing, as possibly one of the greatest achievements in human history. It is truly amazing that the human brain can turn abstract squiggles on a page into a meaningful form of communication. When you look at my handwriting here, our brain is able to look at the you in truly, the you in human. They're actually not even close to the same shape, the way I write. And our brain, through an intricate process of cognitive activities, is able to determine that those are both the letter U. Likewise, towards the bottom of my scroll, my O in into, my O in form, my O in communication are dramatically different shapes. How is it possible that the human brain can do this, turn it into a meaningful form of communication? Reading, one could argue, is one of the most important skills in disruption. It is actually necessary to be able to read to be a disruptor in a technological world. Reading connects our ideas to other people's ideas. It gives us access to education, to income, to health, and helps us explore the boundaries of what it means to be human. How this happens is incredible. We are born, we are pre-wired to speak. We are not pre-wired to read. What has to happen for us to read is we develop neural systems, brain networks that enable this to happen. Visual, auditory, memory, attention, decision-making, organization, speed, all have to develop together in this miracle of neuroplasticity, that the human brain, through experience, through repetition, through repetition, through repetition, builds neural networks. And in so doing, we create a reading machine. The problem is that 1 in 5 of us fails to learn to become good readers. It is a staggering number of illiterate humans. Despite attempts in school, exposure to the alphabet, exposure to phonics, 1 in 5 of us does not learn how to read. This population includes children with language-based learning difficulties, such as dyslexia, to which I will refer in a bit. People who grow up in impoverished environments where the amount of language and discourse and reading and vocabulary is minimal. And people who grow up in traumatic situations where survival is the goal rather than anything as grandiose as reading. When we look at the neuroimages of brains in these 3 populations, we realize that the systems, the neuroplastic systems, have not developed properly. The cost is enormous. To the individual who does not learn how to read, she or he becomes pounded with the message that you're slow or lazy or dumb because you can't read, and one begins to believe that. For our schools, special education is incredibly expensive. The amount of individual educational planning required, small group, maybe even tutorial classes, highly trained teachers, best efforts have only been marginally successful. And to society, when we look at the cost of illiteracy, our prisons are full of people who cannot read, do not read, and particularly in incarcerated youth, estimates are the numbers as high as 70 to 80% of young people in prison are illiterate. We began to look at this issue at the school I run, the Carroll School in Lincoln, Massachusetts. We wanted to understand if we could do better, if we could disrupt traditional approaches to reading instruction. Looking at the neuroimages of brains of dyslexics trying to read, we realized the activation patterns are not typical. You can see this on an fMRI. There are cognitive processes that we can identify as the culprits. Why is this not a good reading machine? Why does this brain not learn how to read? Possibly because of deficits in reaction time, which I'll talk about in a bit, or processing speed. How much information can a brain take in and make sense of? Looking at my scribble. Is that an O? Is that an O? Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Constant decision making. Looking at executive functions such as organization and planning and decision making. Looking at a variety of memory factors, working memory and short-term memory. We hypothesized that we could build a better approach to addressing illiteracy than common practice. And we began doing that. We looked at the population of children at the Carroll School, 414 beautifully diagnosed children with language-based learning difficulties such as dyslexia. These children have incredible gifts, superpowers, dyslexic advantages in many, many areas to become the inventors and creators and designers of our world. But their brains are not good reading machines, and reading gives access. So we started looking at the cognitive profile of these children and realized there were some commonalities. There were some neural systems that did not develop. We wondered if we could encourage or stimulate a neuroplastic response in dyslexic children. We looked at the profile of our students. 60% of them had a significant deficit in a skill called reaction time. Reaction time is this. In front of a computer screen, child sees a stimulus come up on the screen, hit the space bar. Hit the space bar. Every time you see any stimulus at all, hit the space bar. Then the task can become more complicated. Anytime you see a red circle, hit the space bar. If you see a red square, do not hit the space bar. Red triangle, don't hit the space bar. Red circle, hit the space bar. Blue circle, don't hit the space bar. 60% of our children are very poor at this task. Is that a coincidence that in a population of children with dyslexia, we would have this high level of reaction time difficulty? We thought it was not a coincidence. We thought there was probably a correlation. So again, pursuing our hypothesis, could we build a technology that addressed the lack of neuroplastic development of this particular neural channel? Reaction time is a fascinating topic when talking about reading for two reasons. One, reaction time is not a linguistic task. Almost all interventions designed to help children learn how to read have been linguistically based through history. We were pursuing the thought that maybe this non-linguistic task, really a decision-making task, was highly related to oral reading fluency. The second thing that is fascinating about reaction time is it's almost perfectly correlated with oral reading fluency. So if one has had exposure to the alphabet and to phonics and to elementary school instruction, and one has good reaction time scores, one is most likely to have excellent oral reading fluency. How many words can a child read correctly in a paragraph in a minute? Conversely, if one has horrible reaction time scores, it's most likely one's going to be a poor oral reader. So we pursue this hypothesis. We developed a product called Targeted Cognitive Intervention, or TCI. What it does is it assesses a child's cognitive profile. Where's she strong? Where's she weak? Where's his profile? Like the Alps. And based on the profile, the platform will assign activities. We'll basically individualize and send curriculum to each individual based on the profile. what we were trying to do is encourage the appropriate neuroplastic response. What we realized is that doing this was like going to physical therapy. Children did not love having us poke at what they're weakest at. So, like physical therapy, you go there to strengthen a component of your body that isn't working properly. We were poking at what children were not so good at cognitively. So we realized we had to try to make this fun. So we borrowed games that are out there in the open market, such as WhackaMole. WhackaMole is a reaction time task. Every time you see the blue mole, get your clicker on it and click. And that can get harder and harder and harder, more complicated with more variables over time. Here's what TCI does. Seamless, affordable, scalable, transportable, and as I'll show you in a second, effective. Step one, assess the child's profile. Where are the strengths? Where are the weaknesses? Second, in somewhat of a recommendation engine concept, although the designers tell me that's not exactly what it is, based on your profile, if you have weak reaction time scores, it will deliver to you reaction time curriculum, all computer-based, all cloud-based. Then the child will engage in the activities. We've been using 6 weeks per school year, 5 days a week, 40 minutes per session. And the children interact with what they most need to learn, the cognitive network they most need to develop. As a child does well, the technology makes the tasks harder. As a child struggles, the technology moves the challenge to a lower level, making sure that children stay in the flow zone. Then, every day, the platform updates the data and shares that with the teacher. Every morning at 1 a.m., new data on student performance. Because this is like physical therapy, because this is a little bit painful, very often teachers share those data with their students so the children can see that their efforts are paying off, that they are making progress, that they are moving in a good direction. Now, reaction time is not something you can go to the family picnic and brag about. Johnny has fantastic reaction time. There has to be some sort of a socially valid correlate to this work. And that's the fifth skill that the platform delivers to the educational process, which is it correlates the child's work in reaction time, in this case, to academic outcomes. We have been doing this work for 6 years. We've only had the technology platform for this year, the 2016-2017 school year. We used to do this in the old-fashioned way, labor-intensive, too much demand on the teachers, data collection was tiresome, and statistical analysis was done by hand. The platform does all this work for us now. However, when we started 6 years ago, we looked at a group of 55 children who, on the left bar up here, 65% of them had multiple cognitive weaknesses. That's the red on the right-hand bar. The green is how many children had no measurable cognitive weaknesses in this area, and there were very few of them. They did their TCI work, 6 weeks, 5 days a week, 40 minutes a day. The middle bar is what that same group of children looked like in 7th grade. So we start to see the red diminish, we start to see the green increase. Fewer kids with multiple problems, more kids with no measurable problems. And on the right is what they looked like in 8th grade, after they had done another round of TCI, do TCI each year. So we started to believe that this was having a dramatic impact on their cognitive skills. Did it have dramatic impact on something that society cares about, such as academic outcome? This chart shows 4 different groups of children who have received the very best that Carroll School knows how to offer. Small group instruction, intensive tutorial, focus areas where they're weakest academically. Highly trained teachers. Groups 1 and 2 are showing a positive trajectory. as they move from 5th, 6th, 7th to 8th grade, which is remarkable given that they hadn't done that prior to coming to our school. Both those groups were growing at roughly a rate of 2 percentiles per year. So if, for example, a child was 10 percentiles below mean at the beginning, it would take about 5 years to close the gap, to catch up to classmates, to peers. Not bad. You can tell that groups 3 and 4 have a dramatically more positive trajectory in those lines. The only difference between groups 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 is the amount of TCI they had, the amount of targeted cognitive intervention in concert with good phonics instruction. Group 3 is growing at a rate of 5.3 percentiles per year. The child was 10 percentiles behind, about 2 years to catch up. Group 4 is growing at 7 percentiles per year, less than 2 years to catch up. 3 and 4 received TCI earlier and more often than groups 1 and 2. We are excited about this disruption. This is taking a school that's been successful for nearly 50 years, and through the asking ourselves tough questions, we've come up with something that's having significantly better outcomes for children. We want to share TCI with the world. Our goal is to get this out to as many children, adults in this country and others as possible. We're currently conducting research with a neuroscientist at MIT. Hopefully a peer-reviewed published article will be out soon. We are conducting pilots in other Boston area schools next year and hope that pilots will go worldwide. Our goal with TCI is a scalable, transportable, effective, and scalable intervention to address a massive literacy problem in our country. 55 million children, 20% of school-age children, fail to gain literacy skills.